Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at onpurposely.com.
I found a deeper faith, not based on what God could give me, because so much had been taken away from me. I learned that transformation doesn't always come wrapped up with a shiny bow. It came while I was in a dark pit, and I had to make a decision. Do I stay down there, or do I climb up into the light?
We've all experienced it. You run into a friend from the past, but there's something different. They are changed. Maybe there is a calm where there once was a storm. Maybe there is gentleness instead of harshness. There's a new passion, a new life. What changed? Welcome to Brought Back to Life, a podcast where we explore stories of ordinary transformation.
Hi, I'm Ann Kirsten from All Mom Does, and I want to tell you a story about a girl who believed she had no value. I grew up in a family that not only didn't go to church, but who ridiculed those who did. Sadly, my mom's family was full of people who spent more time on the rules of religion than on any kind of a loving relationship with God. And it showed. And it made her not want to have anything to do with God or church. And I think it helped her in a way to make fun of them because they were so good at making her feel bad about herself. And so that's the way I grew up. I was filled with anxiety as a child. I was almost mute with fear. I hardly spoke because I thought if anyone saw inside of me, they would realize how unlovable I really was. And as you can imagine, that's a really lonely life for a child. But through all those lonely years, I felt this presence, this tiny little voice saying, "You're going to be okay." But still, I sat in the corner, dressed in drab colors, and barely spoke. My goal in life was to go unnoticed so that no one would see how broken I was. I had twin sisters in my class in third grade, and they told me that they were going to Vacation Bible School in the summer, and they invited me to go with them. And to this day, I don't know what made me do it, but I told my mother that I wanted to go too. And because I never wanted to go anywhere, my mom signed me up immediately. Mom dropped me off on that first day in this strange place, and my friends weren't there. They hadn't signed up. I think I cried that whole day. And once again, I felt like I didn't belong. I wasn't good enough. And I had nothing to offer those other kids in friendship. And then the teacher held up this beautiful black book. And she told us that if we memorized a list of scripture verses, that we would get a Bible. And this fire lit inside of me, and this voice said, "Oh, you're getting that Bible." And I worked so hard to memorize those verses, and sometimes tears ran down my face when I recited because I was so afraid. But I did it. And the Bible was presented during a church service, and I was so proud. But when I tried to read it, it made no sense. I didn't have a background in hearing Bible stories, so it was like a foreign language. And I put it up on a shelf like some kind of an icon to a life that I didn't understand. I struggled through to my teen years, and that voice inside of me spoke again and said, "You now have to read the Bible cover to cover." So I pulled down my Bible, and once again, it made no sense. So a friend gave me The Way, which at the time was what we called a hippie Bible, written in modern language. But having no one to guide me, I read it thinking that everything in there was condoned by God. All the people were his special people, and everything they did was okay. And that made it a very confusing read, because some of the stuff in there just didn't seem right. But I didn't know any better. I did have friends who started going to church, but sadly, once they began going, they took on this kind of an arrogant attitude, that they were better than everyone else. And that behavior kept me from wanting to go to church for a really long time. My stubborn nature did keep me from peer pressure. All my friends did the usual teen experimentation with alcohol and drugs and sex, and I refused to. Something just kept me from doing those things. But the only negative part of that was that it was hard to see that I was a sinner. I didn't lie or cheat or steal or do any of those other things. So what did I need saving from? Well, toward my senior year, I was still full of anxiety. I had undiagnosed depression that morphed into agoraphobia, and I was pretty much afraid to leave the house. And back then, no one talked about those things. I didn't have a word for what was happening to me. I just felt even more worthless. It took me 5 months after graduation to go out and get a job. Because how can you sell yourself when you feel like you don't have any value? I did finally get a job, and my life became going to work and going home. And it was a really lonely way to live. By this time, I was talking to God in my own way. I was still trying to find him with no one to guide me. And I told him that if he wanted me to get married, that he was going to have to bring the guy to my door because I wasn't going to date. I had actively avoided all dances and proms at school because I didn't have the self-confidence. Well, one day my brother called me. He had a boat and we used to go boating quite often. And he asked me if I wanted to go. I said, sure. And then he turned from the phone and said, yeah, Jerry, she'll go. And I was horrified. My brother said, I'm not going. Jerry's going to take you. And then he hung up. Apparently, this Jerry person had seen me from a distance and thought, well, she looks nice. I'd like to get to know her. I didn't know him. I had no phone number to cancel. I was stuck. And I was literally sick with anxiety. And then the day arrived, and this gorgeous man stood on my porch, and I thought, I don't deserve this. I can't do it. I think I spoke 10 words that first date. And I asked Jerry later, why in the world did you ever call me again? And he said, I was intrigued. And so God did bring a husband right to my door. We got married, and I was still suffering with agoraphobia. Even a trip to the grocery store was a huge, big deal. And I still felt like somehow the world would see how broken and useless that I was. Once we started having kids, I knew that I wanted them to have that faith background that I never had. So we started going to church and Sunday school. And I think what people who grew up in church don't realize is that it can be a really foreign and a lonely place for outsiders. There's a lingo that church people use. Everyone seems to know where to go and what to do. So once again, I felt on the outside. But I was trying. I prayed. I read the Bible. And now I was going to church. I got baptized. It was like I was going down this checklist because I really did want to belong to him. Well, when we were in our 30s, my husband was diagnosed with a deadly form of kidney cancer. He was treated and cured, but I was left with all this anxiety. What else was lurking out there to attack my family? I think intellectually I knew that being a believer doesn't guarantee a happy, stress-free life. But emotionally, you kind of feel like it should. But years went by and my faith grew and I started putting fear on the back burner. And then one night I was heading out to dinner with my husband, and in a split second, it was like all the equilibrium left my body. The world started spinning so fast that all I could do was slump onto the car door. And by the time my husband got us back home, I was really sick. And the next day, my life changed forever when I was diagnosed with Meniere's disease. Meniere's is a disease of the inner ear, and the inner ear controls all the balance in your body. There's a membrane in there that separates two different chemicals, and if it breaks and those two fluids mix, it's like a bomb goes off. And I cannot adequately describe the horror of an attack. The world spins so fast and all your balance leaves you. You can't walk, and all you can do is fall to the ground, while everything twirls faster than you could ever replicate. And the attacks hit in a split second. You could be making dinner, just sitting in a chair, and boom. Sometimes I would have to lay on the bathroom floor for 8 hours at a time, and then crawl to bed and lay perfectly still for days. If I moved my head even a fraction of an inch, the world would start to spin all over again. I had worked so hard to combat anxiety and panic. And I had dedicated my life to Christ and done everything right. And I get this weird disease that takes away a person's balance, security, and destroys their quality of life. And of course I asked, why me? Do you not know that there's serial killers out there? Why can't they have this? And for a long time, there wasn't an answer. And then God asked me, what do you know? And all I could say was, I know you are. And that is all I know. And he said, that's enough. So I had to rely solely on him because I didn't even have something as basic as balance left. And I realized at that point that I had to choose to be happy. My circumstances didn't warrant happiness, so it had to become a choice. So I began smiling whenever my husband came to check on me. I prayed for my friends and family from bed when I could, and I jot notes of encouragement to friends and have my husband mail them. God was giving me peace in a horrible situation. And then one day, my left leg started aching. It swelled up to elephant size. I had developed a clot from my knee up through my abdomen, and they were going to have to break it up. They told me I'd be in the hospital for 5 days, but I woke up a month later in the ICU on a ventilator, a feeding tube, wires and tubes stuck all over my body. I couldn't talk or move, swallow, or even breathe on my own. And my first thought was, you have the wrong person. I'm Anne. I'm a child of God. I've been through enough. Well, it turns out that they had broken my main artery when they tried to break up the clot, and I bled out. I flatlined, and they brought me back, and I ended up giving me 18 units of blood. But every time they put one in, it just kept pouring back out again. And the pressure in my abdomen from all that bleeding was shutting down my organs. They cut me pretty much in half from back to back and left me open to relieve the pressure. I could write a book about how hard it was to come back from that, how each step, figuratively and literally, felt like I was carrying an elephant on my back. Finally, they let me go home, and Meniere's hit hard again, the crazy, whirling, twirling attacks, and I lost it. I was so tired. I knew that God was fair and just, so what was going on? Here I was, a nice girl who had fought hard by herself to find him, and I was being attacked and attacked. I finally had to opt for chemical warfare on my ear. Harsh chemicals were shot into my middle ear over a period of time, and that killed off my balance on that side and also my hearing. I have to think about balance every second of every day now because I get different messages from each ear. But the very worst of the attacks have stopped. So what was the point of all of that pain? I learned that I still loved God through all of that suffering. I gained so much empathy, and you can't have empathy without growing through hardships. I found joy and thankfulness, even in the horrible times. And I was so humbled because God felt like I was worth refining. And I found a deeper faith, not based on what God could give me, because so much had been taken away from me. And I learned that transformation doesn't always come wrapped up with a shiny bow. It came while I was in a dark pit, and I had to make a decision. Do I stay down there, or do I climb up into the light? I'm older now. I'm overweight. I have diabetes. I have scars all over my body. I'm deaf on one side, and I'm dizzy every day. And perhaps all of that gives me a right to be filled with fear. But I'm not anymore. I'm happy and at peace. I have been transformed into a new being. And I am so humbled that the God of all creation took the time to visit a lonely little girl who was filled with fear, who didn't come from a family of faith, and told her she was going to be okay.
We We are telling these stories of transformation so you can know and understand the power of Jesus in your own life. If you'd like to learn more about Jesus and how he can bring you back to life, visit us at onpurposely.com/whoisjesus. And if you like Brought Back to Life, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. You can follow Brought Back to Life on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you're listening right now. You can also just tell your smart speaker, play Brought Back to Life podcast. I'm Sam Kelly. Rebecca Beckett produced this episode. Our audio editor is Scott Caro. And thanks for listening to Brought Back to Life from Purposely.